Hello and welcome to the final review of Request Month 2016. Today we're taking a look at Rocket League for PC, Mac, Linux, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. What you're seeing here is of course the PC version, which was sent to me by Grotnot. Thank you for that, it is greatly appreciated. This is a vehicle-based sports game by Psyonix that was originally released for PC and PS4 in July of 2015, and it later saw a release in this month actually for Xbox One, and the Mac and Linux versions are currently on their way. It's actually a sequel, believe it or not. The original game was Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket-Powered Battle Cars, which is a needlessly long title, and that was only available for PS3, however. And when you get to this one, it's available across a lot of different systems, and it became very well received across the board, whether you were playing the PS4 version or the PC version. And in fact, it's actually one of the rather few games that supports cross-platform play between PC and PS4, although the Xbox One version unfortunately doesn't have that. But even then, the concept itself is actually pretty ridiculous once you get down to it. You're playing soccer or football for you cultured people out there, but instead of running around on the ground, you're in a vehicle and you're smacking the ball with your vehicle. A lot of people act like that is genius, but I'm just fairly ambivalent toward it. It's partly because I just don't like sports games. Honestly, if I wanted to play a sport, I would just play the sport, not pick up a video game about the sport. Luckily, the spin on this is way out of the realm of reality, so it actually is at least somewhat interesting. But I have to say, for those of you who are probably thinking, oh, he's going to be biased in this, I am actually going to be biased in this. I don't like playing sports games. I find them to be very, very boring. Doesn't mean it's a bad game, it just means that I'm not really all that into it. And so that is going to color my perception of Rocket League going into this thing. This is really the kind of game I normally don't have any interest in because it combines two things that I just don't give a crap about for the most part. The first of those being sports games, as I've already mentioned. The second thing being driving. I absolutely despise driving in real life, let alone in video games. So, obviously I'm going into this thing with some pretty heavy bias. That said, that really colors how much I was able to enjoy the game. But let's go ahead and put that aside for the time being, and actually delve into this thing and figure out exactly what it is. Well, before we really get into the meat of the game, let's first talk about the presentation. This does run on Unreal Engine 3, and in some ways it shows. There are those hallmarks of the Unreal Engine that you will notice on occasion. But even then, it actually looks rather good for what it is. The particle effects in particular look great, but the texture quality is rather solid. It's not amazing, but it's solid, and you've got quite a lot of detail put into the modeling. Animations are relatively simple because you've got your cars and you've got the ball moving around, and that's kind of it, really. But while the amount of things being animated on screen is relatively small, they did put quite a bit of detail into the actual environments themselves. Although one issue that does pop up pretty regularly because of the way these environments are designed is that you're going to see a lot of clipping through the environment. And that is just the way that the camera is set up. When you end up running along the sides or going up one of the walls, it becomes pretty noticeable that they didn't detail certain things when they did detail other things. I mean, you can very easily see it in this footage. But that's not to say the game looks bad or anything, it's just one of those weird problems that results from the way the game is designed and the way the camera follows your vehicle. So it's really more of a mild annoyance than anything else. And again, generally the game looks rather good, it's just that it's a fairly simple game, and so you don't really go into it expecting too much out of it to begin with. The sound design is likewise fairly simplistic. You've got the soundtrack, which is okay. It's not really my cup of tea, but it's okay soundtrack. And along with that, you get the sounds of vehicles, which are very well done for the most part. All of the vehicles sound pretty beefy in this. And there's the sounds that the arena itself makes, which is about what you would expect after having been to any sports arena at all. If you've been to, say, a basketball game, or a baseball game, or a football game, or an American football game, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, and they did a pretty good job with that. So the sound design overall is simple but rather well done. But of course what really matters here is the gameplay, because there's basically no story in this thing that I can figure out, so what you end up falling to is actually playing the game. Now there are a variety of modes available, but most of it is just the number of players that you're going to run into, and you can run exhibition matches, which are the unranked mode, and those can have lots of different mutators, like different gravity levels, different amounts of bounciness for the ball or the puck that you're knocking around, things like that. But the core gameplay is the same regardless. You drive around a car, and it has both a rocket booster as well as jump capabilities, where you can do a jump forward, or you can jump to the sides, or even jump backwards if you're happening to go in reverse while you're doing it. And of course you can also do double jumps that will allow you to knock the ball forward, or you can do a jump dodge, which will basically allow you to knock the ball to one side or the other, and you're basically just trying to get the ball in the other team's goal, and if you do that you score a point. And of course if the opposing team gets the ball in your team's goal, then they score a point. Whoever has the most points at the end of the round wins. And that's pretty much it. That's the entire game right there. Aside from that, they offer some customization options that allow you to pick what your car looks like, and of course customize it in terms of the paint job, what colors are going on depending on what team you're on, and of course the various flags that you can have dangling from the back and all sorts of things like that. So they do provide you with something to go back to if a progression system is your kind of thing. But other than the customization options, they don't really give you anything else to mess with how the game actually functions and give you any wildly different modes or anything like that. This is a game that thrives or falls apart based on its core mechanics. And its core mechanics are, frankly, pretty infuriating on my end. You see, as far as I'm concerned, soccer or football for the more cultured crowd is a sport that I have never liked. I just don't give a crap about it, and I hate driving in real life and in video games, so this is actually kind of a perfect storm of things that will irritate me to no end. And it's during those irritation moments where you start to wonder, is this because of me or is it because of the game? Some of it was because of me. I wasn't quite used to the jumping controls, for example. I wasn't quite used to the way the rocket boost can have you flying around the map. But I never saw anyone flying around the map with the rocket boost functionality. Instead, they just used it on the ground, and that's how I use it as well. There's really no point to actually flying around because it doesn't help you out all that much. And more often than not, when you do hit the ball, you end up sending it off to where you didn't want it to go in the first place. Although sometimes you get lucky and it goes exactly where you planned it to, but most of the time you just end up having a bunch of pile-ups with the other cars, whether it be your teammates or the other team, and you all crash into each other, you're all flipping around each other, and it ends up being complete chaos. This is especially true when you're playing the 4v4 mode instead of the standard 3v3 or the lesser 2v2 and 1v1 modes. But regardless, get used to crashing into other players constantly and going careening all over the arena, because that's what happens in this game. You go flying all over the place when another player crashes into you. You end up getting in a big pile up and the ball just kind of lazily floats around. In fact, the sheer amount of floatiness to the way the ball bounces around in the arena is actually kind of infuriating, because you'll line up a shot and you think you've got it, but then you do the jump and, oh, it wasn't going as fast as you thought it was, and so you miss it, and the other team hits it and they get a goal instead. Even more annoying is when it ends up going either on the walls and flies up, or whether it just manages to bounce straight up, because then it takes a while to come back down, and you basically have to go all the way around and come back to actually be able to do anything about that. Because, once again, you're driving cars, you're not running around on the field like an actual soccer player. If it were just a soccer player, then you could actually just turn on a dime and instantly go and hit the ball and you'd be good to go. In Rocket League, you have to make a loop. And while a lot of you would just be like, well, duh, DW, you make a loop in a car, you can't just turn on a dime in a car. I understand that, but it adds a layer of frustration when you manage to miss the ball, or the other team hits the ball when you were right up there and trying to get to it, and there's nobody back there defending your goal, because that's just not how people play Rocket League. You end up going straight for the ball and not much else, and so the other team can basically get a free goal when everybody else is trying to turn right around and go back to catch up to them and get the ball for themselves. which of course means that the core gameplay loop is determined by where you are at any given point and whether or not you're in an advantageous position to actually hit the ball in the right direction, which means that it's pretty frustrating because you could have people playing it like soccer, but then you'd have one guy in reserve basically holding on to the goal and preventing people from actually knocking the ball into it, but that would of course be fairly boring for them, which is probably why nobody seems to do it. Or you could have the effective free-for-all, which is generally what seems to happen, because I would try to set things up for my teammates, for example, and they wouldn't take it, or more annoying, I would try to set things up for my team, and they would be off of the other end of the arena because that's where the ball was at the time, and then we managed to get it knocked over to the other side of the arena, and I was the only one with any boost at the time. And speaking of boost, you can replenish it by running over the various pads that will give you a very small amount of the boost meter, or you can find the energy orbs that are scattered throughout the arena, and those will instantly bring it up to an absolute maximum. And of course you can hold down the boost button in order to give yourself a speed boost, but you can also use it to basically fly around after you've jumped. But it's particularly useful during 3 situations. The first of them is basically the kickoff phase, where you're just all speeding towards the ball and trying to knock it down toward the other team's area. The second one is when the ball manages to get knocked to the other side of the arena, and nobody in your team is really in an advantageous position to get over there, so you have to use the boost to get over there. And the third scenario is when you are just fed up with things and you just start barreling into other players and you actually destroy their cars. Now, they pretty much instantly respawn, but it is kind of annoying to get demolished in this thing. And more importantly, it helps relieve a lot of irritation if your team has basically been dominated the entire match, or you have been knocking the ball around and nobody has managed to score a goal because it just keeps never going where you want it to and things like that. So I guess there's a plus in that. But ultimately, I found that my experience with Rocket League actually got worse the more I played it. The more I played it, the more frustrating it got because you never really work too well as a team unless you basically get together a bunch of friends and you actually start working as a team. And really, that's where I see this game working best. Get it out at a LAN party or just get together a bunch of friends and play it, and just generally treat it as a party game, and it would probably work out just fine. But I've seen people acting like this is some sort of esport kind of game. Really doesn't strike me as that kind of game. There's a lot of luck involved as far as I can tell. But I'm sure those of you who are Rocket League fans are going to attempt to correct me on this and act like I'm basically full of crap for thinking the way I think about this. But really, you need to stop and think about that for a second. You're trying to tell me that a game designed for quick casual play is somehow designed to be an esport, when that obviously is not the case. They designed this game so you can just have some fun with your friends and have some fun online that is very quick and easy to pick up and play. And obviously in that respect it succeeds because it has such a huge player base and people constantly sing its praises as just this kind of goofy fun game. But when you're trying to tell me that it's a very skill intensive game that is designed to be played on a competitive level, you just lose me entirely. And that's my general experience with Rocket League. It just lost me entirely right from the get-go. Before I even played it, I knew that I probably wasn't going to like it because I don't like soccer and I don't like driving stuff, and this combines them. But honestly, I didn't expect it to infuriate me as much as it actually did. If anything, I just expected to find it the way I find all sports games and all driving games, to be ludicrously boring, and yet here I am, and it was very, very irritating to play. But that is entirely on my end. I can see this game for what it is, and what it is a fairly casual game built on a silly concept that is good for some quick casual fun. At least if you're into the kind of casual fun that this thing offers, which I obviously am not. I don't mind a quick casual game, but this is kind of the perfect storm of things that I wasn't going to like to begin with, and obviously after having played it and tried it out, I definitely don't like it. But it's still a very well made game that takes this concept and does it about as well as you could really hope for it to be done. And thus it deserves some commendation for that at the very least. It's not my cup of tea, but you might actually like it. Thus, I'm giving it a conditional 3.5 out of 5. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's a very well-made game and it executes its concept pretty well. But I personally can't stand playing it. Thanks for watching.